have someone who promised you a bunch of things, but it never came to fruition? Did you ever have someone who said they were going to change and it never really happened? Did you ever have someone who promised they were going to go on that trip or get that house or whatever it might have been, and it didn't really seem like there was much intentionality put behind it that it was even going to happen at all? You see, a lot of times when people are dealing with a narcissist, they end up coming across this aspect called future faking. And future faking of what's happening in the future, of what's going to happen, what promises are going to be made that are typically false because they're not really thinking about the future. Well, I want to kind of talk to you today, one, talking about how future faking is not an accident. It doesn't just happen. It's not just something that's like, oops, I forgot, we weren't able to do this. And a lot of times I want to be able to break down the idea about future faking when we talk about narcissists only being in the present and not really caring about the past and not really caring about the future. And so that's kind of what we're going to dive into. My name is Ben Taylor, and I run Raw Motivations. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this platform to provide awareness, growth, healing, and change. We do it on all different platforms: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. If you haven't followed us yet, then look us up under Raw Motivations. And maybe you want to listen to it in the podcast when you're running or you're going to work, whatever it might be. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, all the different podcasts out there under Raw Motivations. Okay. Also, we've got a couple people that have been asking about hearing from the wife's perspective. We've done a couple lives that are on YouTube that people have seen, but we wanted to start bringing it to you on a weekly basis. And so what we're actually doing is we have a podcast that we developed called Trauma, Drama, and Life. And y'all have been exceptionally amazing at supporting and helping as we've been producing that, sending in emails, letting us know what to talk about next. Like all different types of stuff has been absolutely amazing. The support has been really amazing. So thank you guys so much. But if you want to hear the wife's perspective, check that out. Trauma, Drama, and Life. I want to talk to you real quick about the Narc app. We've been making some changes, some modifications, and we've had some really amazing shares inside the Narc app. Not just with the community of people that are asking advice and gaining support and encouragement, but people that are starting to bring in their success stories of this is what's happening. This is how I'm growing. This is how I'm healing. This is how I'm getting free, which has been absolutely incredible. The other day, I was a part of one of our monthly coaching that we do every single month, first Monday of the month. And we bring in coaches from across the country. A lot of times I'll speak and other people share a lot of different things that happen. And just being able to connect with people there and to be able to see their success stories has been amazing. So really want you to check it out. The NARC app, what it stands for is Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Community. That community piece is huge because you need help. You need support along the way. You need people that actually understand the craziness that you're going through. So check it out at narcapp.com, narcapp.com, narcapp.com. Would love to have you join there. If you want to talk to me one-on-one, would love to interact with you. Go to rawmotivations.com, click on one-on-ones. You can interact. We can work on some coaching, work on the trauma bond, rumination, working on boundaries, all that kind of stuff. So anyways, check it out. That's all I got. Okay. Future faking. Okay. We normally talk about narcissists like living in the present. They're not really thinking down the road. They're not really thinking of stuff that's going to happen or that's going to come to pass, but really they're just in the present, like in the mode, like what I want, all right now. Okay. Because when you bring up the past, it's like, no, you can't bring up the past. The past is in the past. We don't bring up the past. We don't talk about it anymore. And so you're not allowed to bring up the past. But then when we talk about the future, a lot of times there's no kind of forward vision or future vision of what they want or where they're going to go, even in life. A lot of times it's only here in the moment, here in the present. And you see that exemplified a lot of times in a day-to-day basis when there's no concern for your safety, of how they're treating you, of how they're acting towards you, of how they're being safe with the things that they're doing to you, with you, around you, all types of things. You see a lot of times there's no concern for like health concerns, your health concerns especially, sometimes their health concerns, but they really don't care what they're putting in their body. They really don't care what you're doing. They really don't care about other stuff that's going to affect them long term. It's all about the present. A lot of times there's no concern and no care for your respect for you. And oftentimes we see this in developing other relationships and cheating on you, going out of whatever you've decided in your relationship or marriage or whatever it might be. And you've gotten to the place where you're like, they don't really respect and they don't really care for me. And they're not really thinking of how are my actions going to hurt someone's safety, someone's health, or my respect, my love, my care for them. And so a lot of times it's just impulsive. Let's just do it. Let's do something. Okay, but it's going to hurt someone down the road. It's not even a thought. It's not even something that the narcissist is thinking of half the time. A lot of times the narcissist is so focused on the now that they don't really concern themselves about the future. So you might be asking, okay, but what about future faking? How does that actually fall into place? Well, future faking is an intentional false promise to avoid a current circumstance. Future faking is an intentional false promise to avoid a current circumstance. You see, future faking is actually a lot more current than what you think. Future faking is the idea of let me get out of the current situation that I'm in, and I can do that by promising something down the road. I can do that by showing something that's going to happen, or that I'm saying that I'm changing, or I'm saying that, hey, we're going to do this, whatever it might be. It's the idea of like, let me change your perspective. Let me change your focus and shift it. If I can shift your focus a little bit, then you don't actually see what's going on. It'd be almost like a magician when they're doing sleight of hand tricks or things like that. When they're doing that, all they're trying to do is to get sometimes you to have your focus in a different area so they can do something over here. That's what a narcissist is oftentimes doing when we're talking about future faking. It's actually more about the present moment than it is about the future promises. And you see, a narcissist will take the moment that they're in. Maybe it's a moment of you holding them accountable, or they're getting ready to reveal something that's going to expose them, or many different things that might be happening. And the idea is, let me avoid the current circumstance at all costs. I'll do it with distracting, with devaluing, with distorting, with everything that I can, but I'll also do it with false promises of saying, hey, this is actually going to happen. Sometimes you'll see that happen in retrospect. And it's just another manipulation tool of like, well, I was going to do this, but because you got mad at me. Well, I was going to take you on this trip, but I'm going to go by myself because you disrespected me. Sometimes they'll do that as well. Where a lot of times they didn't have any intention of even taking you or going or doing or whatever was planned. They don't have any intention of that. They just use that in a manipulation facet. So when we talk about future faking, it's not really the idea that they're looking down the road and thinking, how is this going to help another person? It's more or less, how do we get away from the current situation? So future faking is current in the moment. It's that idea of how do I get out of it right now? Sometimes people wonder about this when we're talking about lying. They're like, are they intentionally lying, or is it just habit? Do they not know? And a lot of times it's both. A lot of times it's the idea of it being a habit and a defense mechanism of someone asks like, did you do this? And like, no, I didn't do this. And then they're like, okay, now I just lied about it. Now I got to think, what story do I have to build behind it so that it appears to be real? What fabrication do I have to put together to make my story check out? And so then it goes back and forth between habitual and stuff that has been ingrained in them for a long period of time as a defense mechanism to avoid accountability. And then it goes into intentionality of like, I have to do this lie now because I've already said something. I got to figure out how to back it up. Sometimes you see this in the aspect of cheating. Of like, do they not think of how it's going to affect others down the road? Do they not think of how it's going to destroy the marriage? Do they not think of how they're going to lose their job because of what's going on down the road? And the answer is no. They don't think about the future in that regard. They don't think these have consequences that they might happen. Because a lot of times that ego, that entitlement, that expectation of everything that people are supposed to give them is normally there thinking, no, I'm entitled to this. This is already mine. Why does it matter? Because they're not looking down the road. You see, future faking distracts you from reality. It gives you empty promises. Hey, we're going to buy that house. We're going to go on that trip. We're going to change. There's going to be change that's going to happen in my life. I'm going to get better. I'm going to go to counseling. I'm going to go to therapy. Like, we're going to work on this. We're going to have this happen. Like, I'm going to get clean. I'm going to go through a detox program. I'm going to stop being abusive. I'm going to change my behaviors. I'm going to change my words. All these different things will get thrown at you. And you're like, oh my gosh, like they're finally getting it. They're finally understanding. They're finally going to change. They're finally going to get better. We're finally going to do what we want to do. But the majority of time, it never happens. Because what's actually happening is not future plans, but future false promises. And typically what you'll see is you'll see those things be thrown out there of like, let's do this, we're going to do this, I'm going to do this. But there's no really plans that follow that. There's no like set steps of this is how we're going to get there. This is what we're going to do. Instead, what you'll hear is, I'll get better. Or how are you going to get better? Well, I'll talk nicer. Well, how are you going to stop cheating? Well, I'll be more honest. And you see a lot of these lame excuses and lame reasons of like, well, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, when in reality, no. Because they don't even have a plan, and they aren't even going through that intentionally of meeting that plan, of meeting that requirement to get to the place of fulfilling that promise. I remember there was one time I was talking to a couple, and literally the words came out of like, oh, well, I'll just talk to her better. I'm like, okay, how are you going to do that? Well, I'll just do that. And I'm like, okay, well, how are you going to plan to do that? Well, and he finally got upset and just like left the call, because like he didn't want to come up with a plan, and he didn't want to have accountability or transparency or honesty to make sure that he was actually showing up in a way that wasn't just future faking. You have to be able to understand, and you have to grasp this. If anything out of this whole video, you have to be able to grasp this. If a promise makes you slack on current accountability and current consequences in that relationship, in the present, you're being future faked. If there's a promise of something down the road that makes you slack off on the accountability and the consequence that's happening in the moment, then typically you're being future faked. You need to be careful, and you need to watch out for the narcissist trying to distort your reality, focus you on the future when it's just full of false promises.